Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by eBodyBoarding.com and Tribe Boards. Well, howdy, folks. Jay back again with another episode of The Real Deal Show. I'm stoked to be here with you. Thank you so much for supporting The Real Deal Show. I'm not sure how many episodes I've put out, somewhere around 15, and I'm going to keep going. And again, occasionally I miss a week, but I'm trying to put these out weekly. Just some fun content for you to check out. Obviously, I have been a bodyboarder for a long time. At the date of this recording, it's been over 42 years for me riding a bodyboard. So I come from a perspective, I guess you could say, of the old school rider. I've been around for a while, since what I call the golden era of the sport, which was kind of late 80s period into the early 90s. So I like to kind of highlight some of those moments in some of these shows. The last couple shows, I showed some prior editions of BodyBoarding Magazine. I'm going to do one of those for you once again here today. This is the June-July 1988 issue of the magazine, and I apologize to those of you who are listening on the podcast. Obviously, there's some visual elements to this show occasionally, and this is one of those. But I'll try to describe what I'm holding up. So just holding up now the cover of this issue, the June-July 1988 issue. It has a picture of Keith Sasaki, very brightly colored wetsuit, which was the standard of the time, bright colors, late 80s. We all know that. Even the logo on the cover, we got a fluorescent pink font with a yellow background for the BodyBoarding Magazine. It's a picture of Keith doing a backside snap, and he was, one of the icons of the sport. Still is, of course, but really at the top of his game back in those days. Right on the cover, opposite of him is, I showed this in the last show. That's me on the Mach 20 RS. I already went over that. So listen to the prior show to hear the backstory on that shot. So we get into the magazine, and the very first ads, generally speaking, the advertisers paid more to have better positioning in the magazine. So the back cover was also a big one, and the inside of the front cover was a big one. Scott Hawaii, who was known for making state-of-the-art bodyboards back in those days, they also branched off into the sandal world. So they had the inside cover, and across from them, Freestyle watches. Mike Stewart was kind of their main rider at the time. So we got a picture of Mike Stewart doing an air back then. And again, bright colors were the order of the day back in those days. Flipping through the mag, next ad's going to be the Alita ad. And this is Jack the Ripper Lindholm. Again, sort of the guy who brought the drop knee stance, also known as the Jack stance, after Jack himself, to the sport. And there he is donning the Alita wetsuit. So moving into the next couple of pages here, we got the masthead. The editor of the magazine back in those days, Dave Gilovich. Now, Dave was the editor of Surfing Magazine, so he was therefore the de facto editor of BodyBoarding Magazine as a result. But Bill Delafield was really the guy who was the managing editor, and Bill was an English major who was not a bodyboarder, but he was a talented writer and knew how to put together a magazine. And Bill put together a lot of these early magazines in those days. Photo editor was Peter Brullier, who still shoots photos to this day. But he was a super cool guy from Huntington Beach, and the list goes on. They're listing people like Sam George. He was the senior editor of Surfing Magazine. So again, the de facto editor of BodyBoarding Mag, because BodyBoarding Magazine was produced by Surfing Magazine. Early BZ ad I'm holding up here has two pictures, one of Ben Severson and one of Danny Kim. Danny Kim, of course, the first stand-up rider to be a star in the sport of bodyboarding, and absolutely ripped the bag out of every wave that he stood up on. Not a big wave rider per se, Danny Kim, but he was super talented, man. And he's still over there on the west side of Oahu. You can find him on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. More Keith Sasaki, more Kai Santos, who we mentioned in the last show. He was on the cover of that episode. And that's a Quicksilver ad. So yes, the major clothing brands did advertise in those early magazines. So Kai Santos, and that goes to follow Instinct with a double page ad. Instinct was a big clothing brand back in those days. A guy named Ron Mix, who was from Hawaii, now lives down in Costa Rica. Pretty simple ad there. And again, Keith Sasaki. This is an O'Neill ad. Keith Sasaki with a drop knee barrel there. They plugged him heavily. He was sponsored by their wetsuit and clothing brands. So one of the early guys to have one of those more exclusive contracts. Across from that, you'll notice, those of you watching on YouTube, this is an ad for a Mike Stewart bodyboard bag. Now, this is long before he had started Science and Gyrol, his two brands, and MS Viper, actually 3 brands that he has. But that was an early board bag that he put out. It looks like maybe it was licensed out. There's a company called Active Sports Marketing International, and they also are slinging a board they call the Stingray at the bottom of that ad. That brand did not stick around very long, as you probably know, since you probably never heard of it. More O'Neill ads. So they went huge in the advertising. They're featuring Sasaki with a backside snap on one page, Mike Stewart with a barrel on another. They even have Kevin Okamura down there in the ad appearing. So a lot of really funky artwork, and you can see kind of just a weird palette of colors and sort of trendy, artwork there. Here's a really cool ad, I thought. Gotcha, which another big clothing brand of the day put out. And this is a 3D ad, and they even included, look at this, 3D glasses in the magazine. They came with the mag, and you looked at the ad with the 3D glasses. That's pretty interesting. You really haven't seen that since then. So that was, again, 1988. Sasaki again. So obviously huge presence for Sasaki. This is a Mach 20 RS ad. So Keith hopped on the Mach 20 RS. Little lip bash there. And flipping pages. We saw the Surf Animals ad from Sentinel in the last show, and they ran the same ad again with their little cartoon character bodyboarders, which is, I don't know, disturbing. BZ Pro Boards actually made the boards, but they had some different offshoots. They had the Surf Animals series. They had Attack, which was another brand that they put out, which was kind of geared more as a sporting goods brand and less as a high-end brand like BZ was. So they were trying to, gather all different facets of the market back in those days. Next page, Wave Rebel ad. Just kind of a basic ad with Pat Caldwell ripping a cutback on the bottom corner of the ad. And then, again, the cartoon ads with BA Surf Stuff. BA Surf Stuff, I believe, was a surf shop up in Manhattan Beach. And they ran a full-page ad in BodyBoarding Mag, which was interesting for a shop to do that. Flipping the page, we're moving on to a Victory Wetsuits ad with a bodyboarder from Ventura named Rex Thomas, who was one of the better California riders of the day. And across from him, we have a Madrid ad. And now Madrid made bodyboards. Jerry Madrid, known for in the skateboard world for making skateboards back in the day, but he had a line of bodyboards and he was plugging them. Did it for many, many years. So in that ad, you have 3 riders, Bob Forbes, Kevin Baker, and that is Joe Foster on the top shot. Joe Foster is now a surf photographer. Sorry about the microphone, bumping the microphone here, folks. So yeah, a lot of these guys still involved. Bob Forbes still surfing a lot. He's now into stand-up paddle surfing, and Kevin Baker, not so much. Don't see him in the ocean much these days, actually not at all, but a good guy. Moving on, some funky, weird ads. These are the kind of ads, to be quite honest, when I'd open the mag, I'd just flip right past them. They don't have a picture of a guy bodyboarding. Doesn't really make me want to stop and check out the ad. So I don't know. Those guys spent a lot of money. One is a Reef Brazil sandals ad, and the other is an ad for Mambo, which was an Australian brand that was branching off into the United States. We got a Rip Curl ad. Rip Curl supported bodyboarding, and you can see there's a shot up there on the top of Tom Prince and Kevin Baker, both San Clemente guys. Tom's still a good friend of mine, still in the water all the time. And they were plugging those wetsuits. Easy Rider was a new brand to the sport. They ran a 2-pager with my good friend Matt Allaire. Matt is a friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, and there he was hawking the Easy Rider boards, which, by the way, that brand eventually went on to become one of the main sponsors of the U.S. Pro Tour. This brand, Peak Wetsuits, that was an Australian brand of wetsuits. They used a guy named Bill Hebner to advertise the wetsuits. Again, bright colors in the ad for those of you watching on YouTube. Good times back in the 80s, man. And this is kind of interesting. There's an ad here for fiberglass bodyboards from a company called Insanity. So fiberglass bodyboards have been around for a long, long time. I still see them pop up every now and then. There's a few folks that contact us here at eBodyboarding that still use fiberglass bodyboards. So it is a thing. Personally, not for me. I need some flex in a bodyboard, and I need a soft board to land on if I hit the lip. So next ad is for a company called Team Gear, clothing brand. They ran an ad with Haoli Reeves, and board socks across from that, from Ocean and Earth, another Australian brand. And we continue with the theme that we saw in the last couple of shows, Captain Turbo doing his cartoon ads, continuing the series. It's like like a comic strip series. You got to keep looking at the ads in every new issue to see what Captain Turbo is up to. Russ Brown was working on some new boards. In fact, this is one of their main ones. This is the Turbo XLR8, which Mike Stewart eventually hopped on and famously got a couple of shots on. Had the scoop nose with the vinyl deck. Vinyl decks didn't stick around very long in bodyboarding. They are super slippery. They looked super clean. You could put cool graphics on them, but they were really slippery, and they didn't hold wax well. Like, you put the wax on and it would just kind of slide off over time. So they didn't stick around long. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Here's yet another. This is it's kind of weird because you got, look at this. On one page, you have the Turbo XLR8 ad, and you see that little bottom turn shot in the corner of the ad. I think that might be Kai Santos. And then you flip the page, and yes, it is Kai Santos. They ran the same shot, but full page. So I don't know what the theory is there. They're doubling down on that board. Kai Santos at Pipeline making a bottom turn on the XLR8. I was sponsored by Flowhost, which is a sandal brand. And they ran this ad of me squatting on the rocks, looking at myself, doing a backside drop knee layback. So that was an interesting take on the bodyboarding world here for the sandals. Platts, another surfwear company out of Australia, I believe, and they were sponsoring bodyboarders. So clothing really big in terms of the sponsorship opportunities for bodyboarders back in those days. Here's an article on the 88 World Amateur Championships. Now it's called the ISA World Surfing Games, I believe. It's an event that's held every, I believe, 4 years. I could be wrong on that. Apologize if I am. But the ISA Surfing Games basically brought together the best amateur surfers and bodyboarders, and they'd held it in a different location every year, a different country, and crown world champions in surfing and bodyboarding. Well, that year, the two American riders were Kainoa McGee and Chris Cunningham, and it was held in Puerto Rico at Surfers Beach. And it looks like, let's see who won. I think they might have had a junior division and a senior division, and each of them won those divisions. I'm not sure. I'm not going to read the whole article, but in any case, U.S. took the crown at that point. So, moving down the line, Maury Boogie Bodywear. I showed you an ad the last time. They were my clothing sponsor. They ran that black and white ad of me doing a cutback, sort of pixelated. And we have an interview here with a guy named Joe Wolfson. He was also known as Dr. 360. It's just a little blurb about Dr. 360. Now, that guy was an interesting cat. I could go on and do a whole show just about Joe Wolfson. So Joe was he was, at least for me in the 80s, Joe was an older guy. So he was, 15, maybe 20 years older than me. So I was in my 20s at that time. He was in his 40s. And he was such a cool, gregarious character. His whole act was, he had this big, bushy beard. I remember he worked for the city of Carson, California. That's what was his day job. But he was known to paddle out at 40th Street in Newport Beach, and he would sit way on the outside. And he would wear like a 5 mil wetsuit because he would be in the water literally like 8 to 10 hours straight. The guy was a freak. He would not get out of the water all day. He would just sit way out the back. He'd wait for the bomb sets, and he would take off. And he had this, the reason he was called Dr. 360, he had this move where he would sit down on his butt on the board and just do multiple 360s across the wave on the biggest sets of the day. And he would cackle, laugh while he did it. And he was just always smiling, always happy. He was one of the early guys to go to Puerto Escondido before anybody really knew about the place. He was down there in the 70s with some California surfers, and he would do the same thing down there. He'd paddle out on the biggest days, charge, and take off, and he would do those butt 360s at La Punta down there. He was such a trip, such a good guy. He actually, he gave back a ton to the sport. He put on a series of contests sponsored by Scott Bodyboards, and it was just a fun time. He would do an after party with food and always down to do anything involved with bodyboarding. And sadly, the story with Dr. 360 is he eventually contracted cancer. And as the story goes, and forgive me if I'm a little inaccurate in some of this, but as the story goes, Joe's health providers wouldn't give him the scans that he needed to get. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, never smoked a day in his life, mind you, but they wouldn't give him the scans that he needed. So his illness went undetected for so long that it started to spread through his body. And Joe, he was a vibrant, healthy dude. And obviously that's a devastating blow to learn that you have essentially terminal cancer. So Joe made, he tried to he got his affairs in order, and he tried to, one day he decided he was going to paddle out to this offshore buoy, one of these boating buoys in the South Bay, and he just would sit on his bodyboard and just let himself pass away out there. So he spent the night out there, and I guess some boater reported him because he was sitting next to one of those buoys off the coast, and the Coast Guard came and got him. But eventually he ended up dying in a car crash, which some believe that he drove off the road on purpose. I don't know. That was the rumor at the time, but it was a sad ending to an otherwise fantastic life. and a bright light in the sport of bodyboarding at the time. Dr. 360 Joe Wolfson. So this is pretty interesting. This is a weird article. So they did an article called, you can see this, I'm holding it up. It says, "Get a Real Job," and spelled R-E-A-L-E, like my last name. And what it is, it's a month in the hectic life of a professional bodyboarder. That's the title, the subtitle of this article. And what it is I had to get a calendar and I had to map out what I did every day. So there's little icons that represented, I went for a surf, I ate food, I watched TV, I went on a trip. They even have funny stuff like Trouble with the Law, Monopoly, just socializing. And I had to put the icons in each day for what I did. So let's see what I did on New Year's Day. This is, I guess, 1988 New Year's Day. Let's see. I didn't surf. I don't know why. Looks like I ate food, of course. That goes without saying. But then there's also a camera here, which indicates that I had a, well, let's see. What is it? Oh, touristing. What did I do on January 1st as a tourist? I have no idea. It's too long ago to remember. So before there was the internet, there was mail order, and Val Surf was one of the biggies, man. There's a Val Surf ad, if you can see that. And they basically listed tons of bodyboarding products that they sold. I will just give you one sample. Here's a board. You know what's ironic here as I look through this thing? It's all skateboards. There are no bodyboards listed on this ad. There's just skateboarding gear. So in a bodyboarding magazine. So again, you know, I think they had done market research and determined a lot of the kids that read Bodyboarding Magazine were into skateboarding. This was a big deal. This was the gear guide. So here's the main page of the gear guide. The gear guide was something that Bodyboarding Magazine did every year, and they essentially went through, you know, products that were available at the time and reviewed them. There's some really cool stuff in here, man. They talked about the hard bottom kits that I mentioned in an earlier show and how they work. And then they went over bodyboards. They even had like specs for bodyboards in there. Look at that, man. Pretty super detailed article that they had in there. I'm showing basically photos of a list of bodyboards. It tells what they're made out of, their dimensions, and so forth. And then, you know, they pepper it with shots. Again, we see Keith Sasaki. Man, this was a good issue for Keith, man. He must have made a lot of dough off of this particular issue because there's a lot of shots of Keith in there. And it kind of has a smart shopper's guide. It tells you how to pick a bodyboard back in those days. There's just one little snippet from this. It says, drop knee riders, for example, might look for a little more width and rigidity. But in theory, the same bodyboard should work in waves from 2 feet to 20. So the most important part is finding the right board for your body size. Which board size will float you without being too wide to paddle comfortably? Yeah, so, you know, they're trying to give early tips on how to pick a board. Obviously, things have changed somewhat now with different materials and stuff. Back then, polyethylene was basically it. That was the only core you could get in those early days. I think Arcel was just coming into the fray back in those days. So moving on to, they went from boards to accessories. So they talk about all the accessories that you can get for bodyboarding. You can see a handle in there. You can see skegs. You know, a lot of people use skegs still. Webbed gloves were used back then. Fin tethers. They talked about board bags and the things that you want to look for when you're buying a board bag. Now, again, this is 1988, man. This is a long time ago. So kind of ahead of their time. I even got a shot in here. I think I billed my sponsor, Stylize, my sunglass sponsor, for that shot because their logo barely appears. I don't know if they paid me. So that's Stylize. And they talk about prices. And then this was a really cool thing, the Test Pilot. So the Test Pilot was a feature that they did every year where a certain rider, in this case, I'm holding up the book, and it's Mike Stewart was the test pilot this first year. Now, you couldn't get a better guy to be the test pilot. So that indicates they try to get guys who didn't have bodyboard sponsors because you're riding a variety of different brands of boards. So Mike did not have a bodyboard sponsor at the time. I think he had just come off riding maybe for Scott Hawaii, and it was before he signed with Maury. I'm not sure. I can't remember that. But Mike basically wrote this article and talked about the different boards. There are pictures of other riders that were riding these different boards in here. This is a cool shot of an early, guys getting ready to paddle out, I think, for a heat. You got Ron Mix, Pat Caldwell putting on his fins. There's Haoli Reeves looking over at him. And Kai Santos is over there, Jack Lindholm. I see Ross Hawk, Australian rider, and Alex DePontes, Brazilian guy. So, legends of the day. But the test pilot gig was pretty interesting. The guys would go out, they'd ride a lot of different boards, and they'd report back on which one worked the best. But the issue there was that, they didn't want to bum out their advertisers. So I would say they kind of sugarcoated it. They avoided the negative comments and mostly just put positive comments about most of the boards. You could call it an advertorial, where these brands would give boards to be tested and the riders would say as many nice things as they could about them. This is an article on the Pipeline event. I showed you that shot of the guys sitting on the beach earlier. Well, that's the beginning of the article on the pipe event of that year. So looks like the waves are pretty good for that event. And the eventual winner, of course, was Mike Stewart. One of 9 times that he won that Pipeline event. Pretty amazing. Second place went to, by the way, $4,000 first prize for Mike in that event, and that's way back in 1988. Dean Marzal took second place, $2,500. That was a big performance for Dean. He's kind of a little guy from Oahu, known for drop knee riding, not really known for big wave riding, but he charged his heart out and got the most inspirational award too, by the way. Pat Caldwell third, Alex DePontes fourth, Jack Lindholm fifth, and Ross Hawk took sixth place in that event. So here's a picture of 4 of the finalists, at the awards. You can see there's Mike, Alex DePontes, Dean Marzal, and Caldwell all standing there. Pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff, man. And the waves were good. Photo Frenzy. This is just basically a photo dump for the magazine. There's a killer barrel shot of Seamus Mercado and a bunch of guys jumping in the air on the top of the photo. So Seamus pulling into the barrel there, and looks like that shot was taken by none other than Tom Boyle, who is pretty much the first guy to pioneer the shore break barrel photo. Sandy Beach, Keiki on the North Shore. He was the guy that helped to start this magazine. So a lot of the shots are Tom's, and he deserves a lot of credit for helping to get this magazine started. An early aerial shot of Mike Stewart right there. And on the bottom corner there, that's Danny Kim, myself, and Haoli Reeves heading out for a session at Rocky Point. I remember taking that picture. Lifestyle shot. Of course, we're always trying to get the logos to show. So I see myself even carrying my board backwards so that the nose would show in the photo, and I might be able to get some photo incentive. My board wasn't tilted at the right angle, though, so I don't think I got paid a lot for that one. Flipping through, we're getting near the end of this. Body Glove, a big advertiser back in the day. They sponsored Ben Severson and Danny Kim, who you see there. And the rest of the test pilot article with Mike riding a bunch of different boards. Wilson bodyboards. I think we had one of those ads in an earlier episode, opposite of the test pilot article. So wet moves was their tagline. I don't know. That's weird. Airwalk shoes, again, skateboard brand, branching off into bodyboarding, a sport where you don't even wear shoes. So that was interesting that Airwalk would advertise. And then moving through, we have, I believe this was a sticker gotcha inserted in the magazine. And the reader's poll ballot once again in the magazine, trying to get you to pick your favorite rider. And as we get near the end, Churchill fins staying at the forefront, really the main brand in the sport at that time. Churchill was, the dominant brand, and they're still around today. Churchill fins still on the market. And getting towards the end of the issue, here's an interesting one. They had Richard Marsh, pro surfer, and they advertised in a bodyboarding magazine. That is Cats. I don't even know what Cats was. Was it? I think it was a clothing brand. But yeah, that was probably a wasted ad. Bodyboarders would just flip right past that one because there's no bodyboarder in the ad. And they always did the scoreboard. Lots of contests back in those days. So they'd run the results at the end of the magazine, which was fun because you got, if you saw your name in the mag, hey man, I was in Bodyboarding Magazine, and you cut it out and put it in your portfolio. Pretty cool. Blackball. Blackball was actually a brand back then. Look at that. They made t-shirts. Pretty cool. Blackball, if you don't know, is a thing that they have here in Southern California. And it's essentially where certain beaches in Southern California kick the surfers out during the day in the summertime to protect the swimmers and the little kids. And by just virtue of being associated with that group, bodyboarders get to stay in the water because we're on soft boards. So bodyboarders tended to love the blackball. When the blackball flag would go up, that meant, hey, they're kicking the surfers out. We get to stay out without any surfers in the water. Here at our local beach here in San Clemente, they still have the blackball during the summer months, up in Newport, certain beaches in Huntington, down in Oceanside. So there's several beaches that still have it. The wedge is very unique in Newport Beach in that the blackball means no flotation devices at all. So it's body surfing only between 10 and 5 during the summer months. It's actually May 1st to October 31st, I believe, for the wedge, and it's 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. No flotation devices at all. So you got to be body surfing only. And we're going to do a wedge episode of the Real Deal Show in the coming weeks. I want to get some experts to come in and help us out. So that does it. The final back cover was Kevin Okumura on a Scott bodyboard. And Kevin, one of the smoothest bodyboarders to ever lay on a piece of foam. Trust me, that guy, he was credited with inventing the no-handed spinner, which is the standard in the sport. And he was just super smooth. I mentioned him in a prior episode, but Kevin, a great friend, great rider. So that does it for the June-July 1988 issue of Bodyboarding Magazine. Hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane here on the Real Deal Show. Folks, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get notification when I publish a new episode. And like the episode, hit that little thumbs up and throw down some comments if you enjoyed it. And, if you have ideas for future shows, for sure, throw those in the comments as well. Or email me at jay@ebodyboarding.com and tell me, what you think. So plenty more episodes to come. I have some ideas up my sleeve, so we're going to get that going. Again, thanks for watching. I enjoy bringing these to you every week if I can. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you in the surf.